All right. Good morning, everyone. Hey, at least it's not an 8 o'clock talk that you're at. Thanks for Circle City for not doing those. My name is Michael Kavka. I'm known as Shecky. And if you want to know why it's Shecky, hit me up after the talk. I'll be more than happy to tell you about a dwarf, a tie, Disney World, and karaoke. Anyways, this talk is called Get Off My Lawn, or Are We Looking for the Right People? We all know about the issues that we have with hiring nowadays. A little bit about myself. I've been involved in IT professionally for over 20 years. I've been playing around with computers for over 40 years at this point in time. I started when I was really young, and my dad got an Atari 400. So that gives you a little idea there. The last 4 years I've been working as a security engineer. Before that I was a network engineer. So depending upon where you feel network engineering lies, it could be that I've been in security longer or shorter. I have my blog site, which is siliconeshecky.com. I've been a little lax in that this year. I got to start posting a little bit more. And if you don't know, you can follow me on Twitter at siliconeshecky. So before we get started, Starfleet Command needs you, which is us. We need the people out there to go ahead and help us recruit into our field. And I call it a field. You hear back and forth the whole time, whether are we in a field or an industry. And the words are very meaningful out there. Because one denotes that we make something physical or semi-physical in the case of software. And one denotes that we are an area of study. So the smallest change in the whole thing is this. We are a field. That, I look at it as the big, overblown thing. Security is a field. Inside of that field of security, we've got a subfield of information security, which is more than just the IT stuff, physical security, social engineering. Going along those lines, the people that the man traps that you deal with, that's security. That's not necessarily something that a senior security engineer, as we think of it, would be. But this is all part of the information security field. You're securing information. Think of it this way: a scientist or a doctor, medicine. Is medicine a field or an industry? Anybody? Anybody want to take a stab at that? What do you consider it? Both? A doctor is in the field of medicine. Abbott Labs is in the field is in the industry of medicine, as they make drugs that you take. And we're in that same sort of situation. We've got a subfield of information security, which is cybersecurity, which is where security meets the computer. Hence the term cyber. And I know a lot of people out there hate that term, cybersecurity. But if you start breaking things down like this, it starts going, okay, so what can we be looking for in this, or in this, for this sort of person, for this sort of field, for this sort of job? And cybersecurity is where the tech meets the road. That's where you get your pen testers. That's where you get your red teamers. That's where you get your malware reverse engineers. Then from there, you go ahead and come on down one more step, and you've got the industry, which is a subset of the field in subfield. So there's the cybersecurity industry, there's the information security industry, and there's the security industry. So you've got a 3-tier there also, the way that I look at it. And again, this breakdown is to go ahead and break things apart a little bit more so we can understand who needs to be where and what type of person do we need to hire for what area of security are we talking about. So if you're dealing with somebody that's going ahead and wanting to be a pen tester, they're going to be working for maybe a company like Black Hills. Or if you're looking for somebody that's going to be writing vulnerability software, maybe they'll be working for a company like Tenable. And Tenable, Black Hills, Trusted Sec, SecureWorks, the companies that you see out there, that's the industry of cybersecurity and security and information security. Are you securing the information? Are you securing computers? You've got companies that go out there and will hold vaults for documents, paper documents. For those of you that have watched Mr. Robot, you've seen that portion of the storyline playing out with the paper backups that they had for all the records and whether or not they could go ahead and redigitize them. So it's a distinction that a lot of us out here just are not making right now. We're just lumping everything into one big lump, and that's the bottom line. And yeah, we're in the security field. Well, really, are you in the security industry or the security field? I mean, myself, I don't work for a security company. I work for a futures trading firm. So I'm definitely not in the cybersecurity industry. I'm in the cybersecurity field. Because I work on a team internally, we don't make any products or anything like that. We use the products that are out there to try and keep us more secure. So as we're going to go forward and start taking a look at who we need, what we need, how are we failing ourselves in nurturing people into our industry, we got to take a look back at a brief history. Because if you don't know where you're coming from, you have no idea where you're going. So in the beginning, man decided to come up with a machine to help in a computational situation. This developed into the computer. Eventually, the computers became connected to each other, creating what would become the internet. They also found ways to allow people to, not on site, to dial into these computers. At this point, we had reasons to be, besides pranking people, to understand why the phone systems worked and how to figure out how to get into these computer systems. Then came the movie War Games. War Games, even though it showed us that because of the phones, even with a heavily segregated system of military research, academic research, and companies that were just starting to go through to each other, things could get bad. Systems could become compromised remotely, and even by total accident. That also went ahead and created all the laws, started creating the laws like the CFAA that we had, that had a huge penalty for curiosity being a crime. We all know that line. Curiosity is not a crime. But we started to actually start to see cybercrime. We started to see worms come out. We started to see viruses come out. We started to see the start of the cybersecurity industry with companies like McAfee and antivirus firms. But the original computers and their communications methods on all of this were never designed for secure communications. It was, back when they designed all this stuff, it was a very small attack surface. You had maybe a couple of modems here or there, and everything else on the network was trusted between each other. You had big machines with reel-to-reel tapes. You had all this stuff. So security wasn't even in the mind. It was literally security by obscurity because nobody even knew these networks existed, or if they did, they had no idea how to even contact them. They didn't look forward. They didn't see what could become. And this is what happens all the time when we're developing new things, is we see what it can do now and what it can do in the short term, but you don't think far down the road, 3, 4, 5 times. What could it become? What is that other scenario? That lack of foresight has created the world that we live in today. Now that we've gone through a very brief history of where we came from, we need to go forward and look and learn and think about how that translates into people coming into our field, where we are now, and where we need to be going forward. And that starts off with, how do we learn? And there are many different ways of learning, and everybody has individualistic styles. Some people learn well in a classroom situation. Some people learn better in individual situations. Some people can learn by books, by listening, or having to do. Today, with the security field growing and becoming more and more important, there are plenty of ways to learn, from the basics to the more advanced techniques. The days of needing to spend years working your way up to learn the basics are not always needed. And I emphasize that because it took me 20 years to get where I am now. The majority of that 20 years was spent as help desk, small administration, then working my way up. I have no degree. I did not. I went to college. I flunked out of college twice. I have no problem saying that because I went ahead and made myself up into what I wanted to do and went for it and took the long way around. So there's definitely something to be said for that old school type mentality. We've got universities. You can now get in some universities bachelor's and master's degrees in cybersecurity. Universities are not noted for having the latest and greatest of technology there. They're trying to keep up. They're a lot better than some places, but especially public universities, they're limited on budget. The problem and the complaint that I see from people is that, somebody just came out of university, they need to get the basics. 10 years ago, TCP/IP was still TCP/IP. 10 years ago, networking was still networking. Your Ethernet frames were still your Ethernet frames. They haven't changed all that much, if at all, in the last 10, 20 years since we started doing this. These are the basics that these people are learning in universities. This is the chance for them to go ahead and get up to speed on those basics. And I see this out on Twitter at times. I see this when talking to people at times. University degrees don't matter much. They matter in a couple of ways. Number one, they shrink that 20-year time frame that I did down to 4 years, 4 or 5 years, where you can get into a more junior type position and have that basic knowledge, especially if you've worked in the computer labs as an administrator. They've got a chance to really go ahead and compress that learning scale on down. So why do we poo-poo on that? Well, because a lot of us back in the day didn't have that sort of ability. When I started trying to go to college, computer science was programming. It was going in there and initially trying to work with Pascal or COBOL or Fortran. And that's not how we think about it nowadays. It's now, I tried to go back to college about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and the first thing that they told me was that, you have to take a basic computer course that went over the designs of the circuits, what a CPU is, what the registers are, the basic stuff that we need to know for what we do for a living. So to say that somebody that's just out of university needs to go and work on a help desk, that's doing ourselves a disservice. Yeah, they need to get brought up to speed maybe on the latest technology, but they have that basics there. And the fact that they've gone through college, through the university, shows flat out that they've got the aptitude and the passion to go ahead and continue onward. The next thing that you've got is certifications. How many people here like certifications? Let's see some hands. One? Sort of, maybe, back there. How many people here think certifications are completely and totally worthless? Go ahead, I'm not going to judge you. You see this debate all the time in our field, especially for those of you on Twitter. It comes up, I think, about every month or two? That people start going off on, what about certifications, etc. CISSP, Security Plus, OSCP, and you'll see a slide in a little bit that I'll show you something on that. But certifications, while they might not be heavily technical, while they might be outdated or easy to game sometimes, it gives a person a chance to get around that gatekeeper. And the gatekeeper in this case is HR. How many people have seen a well-written job request out there? You're looking for a job, you've seen one that's really written out well and tells you exactly what you're going to need to do. Anybody? Sort of. How many people out there take a look at a job request and see, what does this have to do with this? And why is this over here? Hand went right up in the back there. That's how it is. And part of that's hiring manager, part of that's HR, part of that might be corporate policy that you need this, or this. We all talk about networking to get in to a job. And that's a fantastic way to do it. How many people in here are actual hiring managers? How many people out here have been looking for a job recently, are more engineer-based or other-based? Okay. what you've got is you've got the hiring manager. So if I know one of the hiring managers, I could say, okay, here's my resume, man. I'm looking for a job. Here you go. You see this out on Twitter all the time. You'll see this in Slack channels that have job channels inside of it. We're looking for this. We're looking for that. Send me your resume. Unless they're the direct hiring manager, and sometimes even if they're the direct hiring manager, they still have to go through an HR person for vetting to meet certain standards for the company itself. That's not our fault. But having that certification is one way to go ahead and pass through that automated filter on the resume. It doesn't necessarily have to be technical in nature, but it also shows that you have a passion for the industry. You have that drive to go ahead and get that. You want to be there, and you want to have an easier time getting a job in the industry. The final way is what I like to call the old school of hard knocks, self-learning. That's something that we all should be doing no matter what. That's augmented nowadays by sites like Cybrary or IT Pro TV or any of these other learning sites out there. Plus you have things like Hack the Box and your other online CTFs that are out there, which really give you a chance to go ahead and learn. The other thing about university, just taking a step back on it, is you don't have to go ahead and go through security in university. You could still show that passion and work in the labs and everything and learn the basics, and instead get a degree in, say, English. Well, good would a degree in English do? Well, report writing, business, budgeting, knowing where your budgets sit, being able to read a budget. Theater. What good would what area would theater fall under? Very good. Social engineering. So there's a lot to be said about everybody's different way of learning and the different ways that we can get into the industry. But the bottom line is that we need a way for people to get into it, and we need a way to stop going ahead and turning people off from it. As I said, I was going to show you this a little bit. This right here, I pulled this down. This is, the data on here was from April 2017 to March of 2018, so 1 year's time frame. Here's that dreaded CISSP. This is how many certification holders there are. 75,900, 76,000 people. This is how many jobs are requiring or requesting that non-technical, and it is a non-technical certification. It is that 100-foot overview. And it touches on more than just computers. It touches on physical security, policy, etc. 77,000 job openings are requesting that you have this. Here's your GIAC or SANS. You've got 53,000 people there. That's only a couple, 20,000 more than the CISSP. 20,000 more people have the CISSP than have a SANS cert, or have a combination of the two. There's a 20,000 person difference between there. Only 36,000 jobs require that SANS cert. And Security Plus, you would expect that to be that high, and you can see the low. Taking a look at this, that CISSP is a gateway. It is the way to get in. Now, of course, we all know about the 5-year requirement to become a full CISSP, etc. Really looking at the stuff, being in IT for 5 years will basically get you taken care of with that, as long as somebody can vouch for you on that. And that's because the areas all fit in there. Yes? Lower. I want you to serve like a Jedi just this once. And by that I mean mentoring going forward. You take a look at your different areas that the same study did, and you can take a look at your job openings, your operation, your maintaining, your securely provisioning, your protecting, defending, and your top job titles. It's pretty telling out there, but the interesting thing, and this is why I said it earlier, network engineering architect, they considered security. Would you agree with that or disagree? All right. Systems administration. Is that secure? Is that a security role? Absolutely. It's, again, something that we don't think of when we put stuff down on our resumes, though, or when we talk to somebody. I had my first boss that hired me as a security engineer looked at me as coming from network engineering and said, oh, you did firewalls, you did backups. See, you were working in security, you just didn't realize it. And that's something else that we need to remind people of. So, what should we be looking for? And this is the tech, what we should be looking for, which honestly is the easiest part the tech is the easiest part to teach somebody. It really is. You can sit down and teach somebody tech because you've got a physical thing and they can go through it. The non-tech stuff sometimes can be way more difficult than others. This is also where we need to go ahead and open up our minds. Problem solvers and communicators with an interest in the field of security are some of the people that we're missing. They could be in whatever field they want. If they have an interest in technology, an interest in security, and they can solve problems and they've got that mindset, that's what we need out there, and that's what helps bring down that gap. How many people here feel like they're overworked? How many people here are doing stuff that they don't want to do, say maybe policy or report writing or stuff like that? This is, again, areas that we could go ahead and be bringing other people in, as opposed to having them come up through network engineering and system administration, a security analyst. We need people with certain key skills. They need to go ahead and be a problem solver. That's the first big thing anybody in the IT industry at all needs, is you need to be able to solve problems. I've worked at places where I've had to teach the help desk how to solve a problem, a simple problem. Well, why aren't you doing this? Have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? These are the basic things that you need to look at. If I talk to them about technology, they know the basics, but they haven't been thinking about how to solve that problem. They're going, okay, this is a book-by-book thing. This is where mentoring comes in, is problem solving also. All right, so you've looked at it this way. How do you look at it that way? We also need to work on hiring up the chain that way. If you see somebody that's really good at problem solving, bring them up that next level, even if they're not quite ready for it. I would rather have somebody hire me into a position that I'm underqualified for because I could learn the position and learn it pretty quickly usually, than go ahead and put me into a position where I'm going to be overburdened. We need people that are analyzers. How many people here look at log data? How many people here actually do any sort of analysis on log data outside of machine learning? We need people that are communicators. And this is one that you'll hear a lot of talks on at a lot of conferences. You need to be able to talk outside our small circle. And our small security field is even smaller when you start talking about the hacker family or the hacker community that we've got at the cons, etc. I help run a security meetup in Chicago. Where I am located, we have the headquarters of Allstate, we have the headquarters of Baxter, we have the headquarters of Discover Card, and within easy driving distance, we've got Abbott Laboratories. I've had maybe 2 people from Discover Card come out, actually somewhat regularly, and outside of that, none of those other big companies with these big security groups have anybody that shows up there. I've known people that worked at those places, and places I've worked at in that area that people lived up there. I've tried to get them to come out. They don't want to do it. It's their job. They do their job. They'll work long hours even. It's not that they don't have a passion for it. They're outside of our sphere of influence. The amount of people that come to the cons, that do what we do and are semi-social about it or social about it amongst ourselves is so minimal compared to the amount of people working in security and doing these jobs day to day. And we need to go ahead and get those people up to speed somewhat and need to be able to communicate with not just those people, but the people that are beyond that. The CEOs, the managers that are not underneath, that are not above us, the manager of legal. of HR, of budgeting, finance. You get them on board if you can explain things in a way that they can understand it without going overly tech. You've got a better chance, because the second that you start talking above their heads, and I'm sure this happens to some of you that don't know, say, business or what have not, somebody starts talking about ratios and these business terms out there, you just start getting that glazed over look. The same look that I'm sure we're all used to seeing from somebody when we start talking tech. You just start seeing that, you get that same glazed over look at them. We're all smart in what we know. And we all need to be able to communicate in ways to people that don't understand our technology and our stuff. The final thing is a tech inclination. And that's a hard thing to define. Usually I prefer to define it by somebody that's interested in technology. Somebody that wants to learn. I have friends that will come up to me and say, hey, should I go for an A+? I want to learn more about computers. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Again, that's where mentoring comes in a bit. But that tech inclination, that desire to understand a little bit more, that curiosity that does exist outside of the world of IT, about IT. We are not wizards. And the more that we keep ourselves looking as wizards, the worse off we're going to wind up being. So what do we need to do? Well, first off, I wouldn't say hire somebody with no chops to a senior level position. And by chops, I mean hasn't gone ahead and worked their way through certain things. You might be the best hacker in the world, but just for things such as communication and some of the other smaller stuff, learning the environment, etc., sometimes you need to go ahead and start off a little bit lower to bring yourself up. So the first thing that we need to do is we've got people sitting there that are sitting in the SOC, that are sitting in junior roles that want to move up. The only way that they can move up a level, usually nowadays, is by changing jobs, which means that they have to learn a whole new system, and somebody that comes in to replace them has to learn that system, which leaves an area of learning where you're a little bit weaker in your defenses. One thing that you can do is go ahead and offer, and I know this happens all the time, somebody new comes in and they're going to get paid more than what you're doing at that point in time. They flat out, if I'm an engineer and I'm working for, say, Allstate, and I'm getting paid $100,000 a year, the next person that comes in for my position or gets hired to work with me is going to more than likely make more than what I'm making, flat out. A year after I've gotten hired, my salary is below what they're willing to pay people. And that's one of the things that drives us to change jobs, etc. So if you're a hiring manager, you need to fight for that salary area to increase somebody from inside. And one of the easiest things to say to the higher ups at that point is, well, why should we give them that sort of increase to move them up to that position? Well, not only is it industry standard, it keeps them on board, and they know our stuff already. They know our SIM. They know our networking equipment. They know our firewalls. They know our policies, our procedures. We don't have to go through a training period with them. We're just bringing them up to the level that they should be at. And that goes a long way to go ahead and retaining people. And in the long run, what are you doing? You're going ahead and you're taking somebody, bringing them up, paying them that same amount, and bringing somebody else in at that little bit lower level, and you wind up saving some money in the long run. Then we hire those new people from the outside into the junior position. So it should be this chain of progression. The junior goes up to the mid-level, the mid-level goes up to the senior, and the outside comes into that junior level, a junior analyst, a junior engineer. Maybe you go from a senior analyst to a junior engineer. So you move yourself, you keep moving on up there. But when you're talking about from outside, what are we looking at? From non-infosec positions, and this is just a small little thing to touch on here. Librarians. You think of librarians as being in libraries. Well, there's librarians at law firms. There's librarians at medical firms. Librarians are taught to do research. They're very good at doing research. They're extremely good at doing research. So why aren't we tapping into them? Data analysts, your DBAs, your people that are working with data all the time. that love working with data. There's somebody that's perfect for going ahead and doing security analysis. You give them all this data from the logs, and they can go ahead and sift through it 1,000 times better than we can, because that's not necessarily what we're interested in, but it's what they're interested in. And from there, they can go ahead and start learning where they want to go off of there. Do they want to go into other areas of security, or are they just happy going through and being that person that finds that needle in the haystack that says, you've been breached? This one people will go ahead and love. Lawyers. We saw earlier people don't like writing policies. Lawyers love writing policies. They're good at it, and they're sound policies if they know the background structure of it all. And there are lawyers out there that I know that have made the shift into doing IT, and people from IT that have shifted into being lawyers. So why not use them in the area that they're interested in? That policy group. Doing policies, enforcing policies. Doesn't that make sense? It takes you and opens you up for going ahead and doing more of your tech, for looking through those logs a little bit more, for doing a little bit heavier on the pen testing. It's something that you just don't think about, and the reason why is we've closed our minds off. We, the hackers, we, the people in the security field, we're supposed to have the most open minds and the most amount of curiosity, and we've sequestered ourselves. Part of that's because a lot of us, when we were younger, might have been picked on or thought of as nerds, etc. So we don't want to go back to being looked at poorly. Self-image, psychology. We got to get over that and start opening up our minds again and start looking at the different areas that we aren't doing it. Finally, and I touched on this one earlier, actors. I do community theater for fun. It's a hobby. How many people in that industry, number one that I know of that are in the IT field, it's like music. It's like half the people there have done some sort of IT work. But those that haven't, that are curious and interested and just need a little bit of mentoring again and being willing to talk to them and instruct them. I mean, the more people that we instruct anyways, whether they go into our field or not, the more secure we're going to be. Is that not true? If we can get them to understand basic security using password managers, using 2FA, is that not true? Does that not put them sort of in our field? They're actually helping secure the stuff. It might just be themselves, but who knows what that account could go ahead and lead to on a breach? Again, it's opening up that mind. There are more ways out there to go ahead and fill stuff up than even beyond this. It's a field where, we're in a field where there are limitless possibilities. And we're walling ourselves off. You've heard about diversity issues in our field. Agreed, there is. We discourage women sometimes. A lot of times. Sometimes by our actions, sometimes because we don't have maybe some of the social skills that other fields have. But if you look across the board, women have a hard time in just about any field out there. It doesn't necessarily just have to be cybersecurity. It's not something that's indicative to just our field. It's something that's across the world. So what do? You treat them like you would treat one of the guys. You talk to them like a normal person. And I've been guilty of this myself, where somebody that I know, females I know that are way smarter than I am, have started talking about something. They say, oh, so you mean sort of like this, and this? Well, I remember this, and all of a sudden the next thing I realized is like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make that sound like I was talking down to you. I'm just trying to engage in the conversation, and I'm trying to learn how to talk properly around it. I've done that same sort of thing to guy friends of mine. So I don't feel necessarily as bad, but I'll treat both the same way. If I screw up, I screw up, and I'm the first one to admit it. And that's something else that we need to work on, is admitting that we screwed up. Twitter is one of the first places outside of LinkedIn that people will go ahead and find information on security, at least security people to follow and security people to talk to. And you'll get a lot of our rock stars poo-pooing that university degree, those certifications. You'll get a lot of our rock stars saying, you need to go ahead and spend 10 years in the SOC or 10 years as a system analyst before I'd even consider you as for a security engineer position. And all that is cutting off so many things that we could be doing and moving people up. If somebody has a propensity for something, encourage it. I was talking with some people the other day here, and I think it was Jeff Mann, who's sitting up front here, was one of them. We were talking about kids and how we, at a young age, start trying to form them into what we think they should be doing, instead of encouraging them to go ahead and explore outward. The problem is that even if you encourage the kids as they get older, we start trying to peg them down into the, you are this, you are that. You need to encourage and you need to go ahead and be able to open up their minds so that way they can come into our field. That way they can go ahead and be happy with what they're doing. There's a lot of people that try and come into our field that are in it for the money. They work their 9-to-5 job. They have a place in our field. They might not go far. They might not move up the chain or what have not. But they have a place in our field. There are some people out there that are happy as a pig in mud being a security analyst, being a SOC analyst, looking at those alerts day to day, bringing home their paycheck and doing that. And when they want to raise, they move over to a different SOC. That's the way that they want to live their life. All the more power to them. They're probably doing a job that other people don't want to do. But there are people in that same SOC that want to move up that are having a hard time moving up. You take a look at what we were looking at before. A lot of the job openings out there, if you think about it, are blue team. A lot of the job openings that you look out there is not pen testing. It's not the glorious hacking of everything. And that's something else that we need to make sure that people realize. The amount of time I spend inside of a spreadsheet is unbelievable. I spend hours inside of a spreadsheet just to spend an hour or two looking through logs, or rebuilding a SIM, or checking over firewall rules to make sure that we're not putting an all in the wrong place, or even putting an all. People don't see the unglorious part of hacking for us. But the glorious part is finding that little thing, that one little problem, catching that one little extra bit there. That red team that you don't know is going on inside of your network. And catching something odd and bringing it to your boss, and your boss saying, okay, you caught them. Let's let them know you caught them. Or somebody picking up a USB off the ground and saying, I found this out there. I think somebody's trying to get into us. And putting it into a secure, completely offline system and saying, yep, there it is. Here's where the beacon is. I worked at a place where that happened, and I reverse engineered the base 64 encoding that they had put on there, and found what website they were using, and called up that host and said, these people are using that as a C2, and shut them down completely. To which my manager turned around and said, I wish you would have let me know before you did that. Because I got a complaint from the pen test company. But there's so many ways of going through it. And at this point in time, we'll go ahead and hit up my conclusion here. Part of being a hacker is knowing limitations and ways to get around them. The same is true for fostering our field. We need to hack the way that we're doing hiring and what we're looking for. We need to get more specific with our job requirements. And even if it's just in an interview, explain to somebody that, hey, listen, these are what we want you to do, but there's a possibility of going beyond that. The more people that we get in, and the less disparity that we have between job openings and people in the field, the more you're able to focus on what you like to do, that pen test, that research, that reverse engineering, that forensics, without having to deal with, okay, I also have to go ahead and look through the logs today. I don't want to do that. This all helps us out in the long run. And it also makes us more secure because we're not burning ourselves out then as fast trying to do 30 million things instead of the 20 million that we want to be doing. Everyone is smart in what they know. If there's one thing to take away from all this, and I don't have all the answers, I want to open this up as a thinking type talk. I want you to go ahead and open up your minds and start thinking. That's what I would really love to see happen. The final thing is that no one knows everything. If you find somebody that claims that they know everything or acts like they know everything, they probably know very little. And they're fooling themselves, trying to make themselves look better than what they are. I'd rather have somebody come up to me and say, I don't know, than somebody try to bullshit their way, pardon my language if there's kids here, than try and BS their way around and lie to me flat out. Join us. See the galaxy. Any questions? Yes?
So, everybody's got their own method, right?
Correct.
My favorite is just the brute force work ethic. Oftentimes I see things work the way with the help desk on the group favorite for retired. But the struggle that I have is justifying that job position to this person that I know we can bring up to the regs, but HR said, well, we can have this policy. It's not going to rank out in time. So, do you have any experience with that? How to combat that?
That's where you would go ahead and start showing, well, this person knows our systems. You show them what they know and how much faster everything will be taken care of there. Maybe instead of 120K a year, you can get them for 115K. It might not be exactly what the industry standard is, but you say, okay, I can bring them up for 115K and an extra 5 days of vacation a year. And they'll stay here for another 3, 4, 5 years before they're ready to start looking around again where they've hit that bit of knowledge. That's how I would start looking at it for them, saying flat out, we can do that and we can hire somebody at less cost to the company by bringing them in on the junior level where they can start learning our systems. And again, it varies because small businesses, you don't necessarily have that sort of advantage for. Larger companies, you do have that advantage for. But there's always some little angle, especially with knowledge of the company itself, that you can use to HR saying, listen, we're saving money because we don't have to send them to this extra training or anything. They already know what they need to know. They're already doing the job in a lot of instances. We just need to give them the title and the money. Yes? I think it's got a point. My personal preference is if you're going to put a tool in a job description, I would put down that tool and maybe a couple of other tools that are similar to it. Because sometimes putting down a tool, especially some of the tools that we use out there, they're too specific. And you don't necessarily have stuff. When I was working at my prior company, we were looking for a security engineer and we were looking for somebody that knew Checkpoint. And we would get a lot of people sending in, but they were 5, 6, 7 versions of Checkpoint prior. As opposed to somebody that knew more recently, say, Cisco Firepower or Palo Alto or something along those lines, where they could take that knowledge and just say, okay, what's the syntax difference that I have to deal with? Does that answer your question? Anybody else? Yes?
I'm going to go about this thing. 39, but I put back. First of all, like BS, as far as stuff about patents and stuff like that, we learn all that stuff. That's like the first semester, second semester kind of things. You got to realize when my school I had to pass it plus the first kind of thing. The problem is that I took my test 2 years ago, security test, 3.5 ago, and then my other part of school is doing tests. Security policy. This happens, this happens, a lot of it is that, what we do right. A lot of it is just, sometimes when you're talking about these things, it's like six, talk about BS, talk about this. Yeah, I mean, that sometimes doesn't do that. So, it just takes a sense to go like, oh, that's what that happens. So, as far as certification, I don't personally like certification, but I know a lot of people who are way smarter than I am. But on the flip side of that, I studied guess at one point I understand how to they don't know translate. Not knowledge, they don't know translate that job. But a lot of it is the gentleman over here was talking about Google. Just to give you an idea of what I put my action plan. Or well, it's two different ones, but what we were just doing the study portion of it. The book that we have, every chapter has a whole different tools that has a history of it. So, some of them more popular than others. And so many tools out there. And I'm looking to drop this. Concentrate on and fiddle with and play around with. And that's also the other thing. For someone like me who has no experience, finished my bachelor's, studying my last book, but I don't see a lot of positions for like junior type stuff. I could not do your job. Anybody else hire me? You're just why.
First thing that I would, the first thing is this, with the CISSP even, if it's an entry-level job, that's probably something from the company wanting some sort of guarantee that you're this, or they're working, or they're dealing with government and the government's requiring them to do that. Because CISSP is, I still think, a government requirement for a lot of their positions. As far as that, every single job that I've gotten a job that I thought I was way the heck underqualified for. That there were a lot of stuff sitting on there that I didn't know about. And I know my first security engineer job, my boss who hired me at the time, looked at me and said, we had 4 other people that we were considering that had more experience than you. And the reason why we chose you was because we asked all of you guys, what would you do if you didn't know something? And my answers was simple. I would ask my coworkers, and then I would use Google, and I was the only person that said I would Google it. Flat out, if I didn't know it, I've got no problem Googling it, and that made the difference there. So don't go ahead and look at the requirements. The rule of thumb that I go is that if you don't put your name into that hat, you're not going to get it. If you do put your name into that hat, you might not get it, but there's always that chance that you might. It doesn't hurt. It can only help putting your name in that hat. The other thing I would say is, I don't know where you live or anything, if you've got local security meetups or anything along those lines, just start going to them and starting to get to know some of the people out there. Because they might know some people that say, okay, listen, we're looking for this, or we can go ahead and put your name in and give you a good word in with this company if you're putting your name in for it. That's where the networking aspect can really come in. Last question, because we're just about out of time here.
That's just it. Like, just start a motion. Can't get people starting security motion. Those that came from. Right, like, it doesn't matter. Like, just get into IT period. And then follow.
And again, this falls into, on this slide here, system administrator, network engineer, network architect. Those are actually security jobs. They might not be under the security team, but they are security jobs. And they will get you to that next level. Thank you all very much for coming out here first thing in the morning. Hopefully I didn't bore you all too much. Enjoy the rest of your time here at Circle City Con.